The Shurangama Sutra, Volume 3, translated by the Buddhist Text Translation Society. Namo Fundamental Teacher Shakyamuni Buddha. Namo Fundamental Teacher Shakyamuni Buddha. Namo Fundamental Teacher Shakyamuni Buddha. Volume 3. Furthermore, Ananda, why do I say that the 6 entrances are basically the wonderful nature of true suchness, the treasury of the Tathagata? Ananda, although the eye's staring causes fatigue, both the eye and the fatigue originate in body. The attributes of the fatigue come from the staring. Because of the 2 false defiling attributes of light and dark, a sense of seeing is stimulated, which in turn draws in those 2 defiling attributes. That is called the ability to see. Apart from these 2 defiling attributes of light and dark, this seeing is ultimately without substance. In fact, Ananda, you should know that seeing does not originate from light or dark, nor from the sense organ, nor from emptiness. Why not? If it originated from light, then it would be extinguished when there was darkness, and you would not see darkness. If it came from darkness, then it would be extinguished when there was light, and you would not see light. If the essence of seeing came from the sense organ, which is obviously devoid of light and dark, then in that case, basically no seeing could take place. If it came from emptiness, then looking ahead it would see the shapes of mundane phenomena. Looking back, it should see the eye itself. Moreover, if emptiness itself did the seeing, what would that have to do with your eye? From this you should understand that the eye entrance is empty and false. Fundamentally, its nature cannot be attributed to either causes and conditions or spontaneity. Ananda, suppose a person suddenly stops up his ears with his fingers. Because the sense organ of hearing becomes fatigued, he hears a sound in his head. However, both the ear and its fatigue originate in body. The attribute of fatigue comes from the monotony. Because of the 2 false defiling attributes of motion and stillness, a sense of hearing is stimulated, which in turn draws in those 2 defiling attributes. That is called the ability to hear. Apart from the 2 defiling attributes of motion and stillness, this hearing is ultimately without substance. In fact, Ananda, you should know that hearing does not originate from motion and stillness, nor from the sense organ, nor from emptiness. Why not? If it came from stillness, it would be extinguished when there was motion, and you would not hear motion. If it came from motion, then it would be extinguished when there was stillness, and you would not be aware of the stillness. If the capacity to hear came from the sense organ, which is obviously devoid of motion and stillness, then in that case, basically the hearing would not have a nature of its own. Suppose it came from emptiness, then emptiness would become hearing and would no longer be empty. Moreover, if emptiness itself did the hearing, what would that have to do with your ear? From this you should understand that the ear entrance is empty and false. Fundamentally, its nature cannot be attributed to either causes and conditions or spontaneity. Ananda, suppose a person inhaled deeply through his nose. After he inhaled for a long time, he became fatigued, and then there is a sensation of coldness in the nose. Because of that sensation, distinctions of penetration and obscuration, obstruction of emptiness and actuality, and so forth, including all fragrant and stinking vapors, are made. However, both the nose and its fatigue originate in body. The attribute of fatigue comes from overexertion. Because of the 2 false defiling attributes of penetration and obstruction, a sense of smelling is stimulated, which in turn draws in those 2 defiling attributes. That is called the ability to smell. Apart from the 2 defiling attributes of penetration and obstruction, This smelling is ultimately without substance. You should know that smelling does not come from penetration and obstruction, nor from the sense organ, nor from emptiness. Why not? If it came from penetration, the smelling would be extinguished when there was obstruction. And then, how could it experience obstruction? If it existed because of obstruction, then where there was penetration there would be no smelling. In that case, how would the awareness of fragrance, stench, and other such sensations come into being? If the mechanism of smelling came from the sense organ, which is obviously devoid of penetration and obstruction, then in that case, basically, smelling would not have a nature. If it came from emptiness, then smelling itself should be able to turn around and smell your own nose. Moreover, if emptiness itself did the smelling, what would that have to do with your ability to smell? From this you should understand that the nose entrance is empty and false. Fundamentally, its nature cannot be attributed to either causes and conditions or spontaneity.